4, that the voluntary contributions of pledges of AA members should be our principal, and that's PAL, not PLE, and eventually our sole support. Number 5, that we have found it generally wise to separately incorporate those facilities which require much money or management, that an AA group is a spiritual entity, not a business concern. So thank you for catching that. Let me see on there. Also, on page 30, continues of that. The middle of the page, it says, now, what about donations? Page 30. Now about donations or payments to AA from outside sources. There was a time some years ago we desperately needed a little outside aid. This we received, and we shall never cease being grateful for those devoted friends whose contributions made possible the Alcoholic Foundation. The book Alcoholics Anonymous, our central office. Heaven has surely reserved a special place for every one of them. They met a great deal in those days of AAs, were very insolvent. But times have changed. Alcoholics Anonymous has now more than 24,000 members, whose combined earnings this year ought to be many millions. Hence, a very powerful feeling is spreading among AAs ought to be self-supporting, since most members feel they owe their very lives to the movement. They think we AAs ought to pay its very modest expenses, and isn't it that they ask high time that we commence to revise the prevalent idea that an alcoholic is always a person who must be helped, usually with money. How insulting is that, okay? Let us AAs, they say, never be longer takers from society. Instead, let us be givers. We are not helpless now, neither are we penniless anymore. Were it possible to publish tomorrow that every AA group had become fully self-supporting, it is probable that nothing could create more goodwill for us than such a declaration. Let our generous public devote its fund to alcohol research, hospitalization, and education. Those fields really need money, but we do not. We are no longer poor. We can and should pay our own way. Of course, it can hardly be counted on accepting the principle of self-support. If an alcoholic friend comes to a meeting and drops $1 in the hat, it is doubtful, too, if we should refuse the relative who sends in his $5 a mid, a token of appreciation for the recovery of someone close. Perhaps it would be ungracious to refuse his gift, but it is not the small tokens of regard which concern us. It's the large contribution, especially those who may carry future obligation, which would give us pause. Go down to the second and last paragraph, and it says that the acceptance of large donations from any source is very questionable, and it's almost always a hazardous policy. Last paragraph, and it says, it is with the deepest gratitude and satisfaction that I can now tell you of recent resolution passed by a General Service Committee, the trustees of the Alcoholic Foundation, who are the custodians of national aid funds. It's a matter of policy that have just gone on record that they will decline all, not some, not most, not quite a bit, not a few, all gifts carrying the slightest obligation expressed or implied. Any further Alcoholic Foundation will accept no earnings which may be tendered from a commercial source. So you can see that we really have grown into it. Page 32, the last two paragraphs, it says that in any case, nationally speaking, is now self-supporting. To my mind, this is a decision of enormous importance that our future, a very long step in the right direction, when such an attitude about money becomes universal throughout AA, we shall have finally stayed clear of that golden, alluring, but ever treacherous reef called materialism. In the years that lie just ahead, Alcoholics Anonymous faces a supreme test, the great ordeal of its own prosperity and success. I think it will prove the greatest trial of error. Now, how did he know that success was going to be a bigger heartache than failure? Oh, that's right, because he knew. Okay, and it says, obviously, can we weather that? The waves of times and circumstances may beat upon us in vain. Our destiny will be secure. Okay, Now we'll go to lack of money. Thank you. Okay. Page 57. Look at this date, 1947 in June. Lack of money proved to be a boon. It's the paradoxes of Alcoholics Anonymous and God. Okay. We will skip over to page 58. Actually, when you get a chance, time doesn't permit to read this whole article on there, but I'm going to go ahead and start on the second paragraph. Obviously, it says, much discussion, a little meeting was called Dr. Bob and me in the Akron Fall in 1937. And obviously, that's that history that we're talking about the missionaries, and we're talking about the money in the hospitals and so on and so forth. The last couple sentences says a squad of missionaries, plainly to these missionaries, the families would have to eat. It would take money, quite a lot of money, we thought. But that was not all. We felt we needed hospitals at Akron and New York. These places were regarded as the twin meccas, and they had plans to go around the world. Next paragraph. Then there was the dream. That was to prepare a book of experience, the one we know today of Alcoholics Anonymous. So, if anybody asks you what the textbook of Alcoholics Anonymous is, it is a book of our experience. And it says, we were sure that unless our recovery experiences were put on paper, our principles and practices would soon be distorted. And even with that they are. We might be ridiculed in the press. Besides, we did not owe at least a book to those alcoholics who couldn't get to our hospitals, or who perchance were reached right away by our advancing missionaries. As everybody knows that AA's book dream did come true, but the others didn't. It surely looked in 1937 that we must have considerable money. Page 59, second paragraph. The awakening from that money dream was rude. It soon appeared that people with money had little interest in our drunks. Oh, really? Okay. As for our grandiose scheme of branding alcoholics together in squads, platoon, and regiments, well, that was plainly fanatic, wasn't it? Drunk people said it was difficult enough one at a time. In other words, getting alcoholics together is like herding cats. You can't do it. Okay. Skip to the next paragraph. Then one day, in the midst of discouragement, something momentous happened, and was one of those crucial turning points in AA, of which we have seen so many that no one can call them coincidence. At the office of my physician brother-in-law, I was bemoaning in typical alcoholic fashion about how we poor drunks were appreciated, especially by peoples of means. I was telling my relative the 10th time of how we had to have money soon or else. Listening patiently, he said, I've got an idea. I know the name of a man called Dick Richardson. He was somehow connected with the Rockefellers, but that was years ago. I wonder if he's still there. Let me call him up and find out on what little events our destiny sometimes turn. How either of us could have known that simple phone message was to open a new era in AA. That was to inaugurate the Alcoholic Foundation, the Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, in our central office. I talked about that in a roundabout way. Go ahead and skip down to the last paragraph. It says, shortly afterwards, on a winter's evening, 1937, the meeting took place. And this is when Rockefeller invited everybody in, and they brought Dr. Bob, Bill Wilson, and some of the other ones to come in and give their testimonies about Alcoholics Anonymous. Present were Dick Richardson, A. Leroy Chipman, known as Chip, Albert Scott, Frank Amos, and my brother-in-law, Leonard Strang, Dr. Bob, Paul S., by the way, he's from Akron. Came down from Akron. The New York ex-toppers numbered a half a dozen, accompanied by Dr. William Silkworth, who was the first physician ever to champion our cause, had given us measureless help and encouragement. Of course, we alcoholics were delighted. Our money troubles, we thought, were over. If money was the answer, we surely had come to the right place. Following the introductions, each alcoholic told his personal story, these accounts being enthusiastic, confirmed by our ardent friend Dr. Silkworth, after which, with becoming reluctance, we brought up the subject of money. As our hearers had seemed so much impressed by our recovery stories, we made a bold to expand the urgent need for hospital field workers in a book. We also made it clear it would take money, quite a lot. Then came one more turn in AA destiny. The chairman of the meeting, Albert Scott, now deceased, a man of large affairs and profoundly spiritual in his nature, said in substance, I'm deeply moved by what I'm heard. I can see that your work thus far has been of great goodwill. One alcoholic personally helping another for the love of the thing. This is first century Christianity in a beautiful form. But aren't you afraid the introduction of hospital and paid fill workers might change all that? Go to the next paragraph. These are the great words for Alcoholics Anonymous. We alcoholics admitted their weight. Disappointed by our hope of substantial money, help seemed to be fading. We confessed, nevertheless, we had often had such misgivings, but we persisted. What are we going to do? It has taken us 3 years to form these 3 groups. Go down to the second or the very last couple sentences of that paragraph, because the next one talks about Tradition 8 next week. It says, this struck the keynote of our relation to these men, goodwill for all the years since. Rightly enough, they have ever secured us large sums of money, but each has given of himself to our cause generously and continuously, how much few AAs could ever know. Then obviously it goes on page 61, the history of Rockefeller money. Go ahead and read that when you can. The second last paragraph, it said, yet money-wise, our budding movement of Alcoholics Anonymous was still very much left on its own, just where it should have been left to. Then obviously go on to the next paragraph is the history of the Alcoholic Foundation, which later becomes GSO. The last couple sentences says, surmounting many such obstacles, the Alcoholic Foundation finally inaugurated. It had 4 non-alcoholic and 3 alcoholic trustees. Now, isn't that something from the beginning? We had more non-alcoholics than we had alcoholics running the deal. Why do you think Bill did that from the beginning? Because we needed some stability, believe it or not. Then obviously it gave credibility to the Alcoholic Foundation to have non-alcoholics. That's still going on today. We have trustees that are alcoholic, and we have non-trustees that are non-alcoholics. And in fact, a lot of times, some of our greatest leaders in our general service office have been non-alcoholics. So you better be nice to the non-alcoholic that's in your life. He might be running the show for you someday. Anyhow, it says they could appoint their own successors. It was chartered to do everything under the sun. So it had everything except money. I hate when that happens. Isn't that beautiful? Okay. Now, oddly enough, it says AA self-supporting, next page 62, August of 1947. It says last year's have made AA self-supporting. Skip that first paragraph if you would, and we'll go on to the second paragraph where it says, one day in February 1940, Dick Richardson reported that Mr. John D. Rockefeller Jr. had been following our progress with intense interest. He would like to have, for inspiration as guests, and for the benefit of Alcoholics Anonymous, to give a dinner. We regarded this as the 10 strike. And this is when he invited them all in. Go down to the second half of that next paragraph. It says, at the conclusion of the evening, this dinner, Mr. Nelson Rockefeller, explaining his father had not been able to become of illness, went on to say a few things that more deeply affecting and promising than Alcoholics Anonymous had ever touched his father's life, that he wished his friends to share this experience with him. Though great wealth was present at the dinner meeting that night, little was said about money. Hope was expressed AA might soon become self-supporting, but that suggestion was made that until AA became self-supporting, a little financial help might be needed. Following the dinner, Mr. Rockefeller wrote a personal note to each guest, expressing his feeling about AA, including with the observation that he was making a modest gift. According to each letter was a reprint of talks given at the dinner and a copy of Alcoholics Anonymous. On a receipt Mr. Rockefeller's letter, many of the guests responded to donations of the Alcoholic Foundation. What it was is Rockefeller made a donation, and then most of the guests followed his suit. So if Rockefeller, whatever he donated, the J.C. Penney that had half of what Rockefeller's worth was, made half the donation that Rockefeller did, and it went down the line. The bottom line is, yeah, it was some money, but it was a small pittance of what Bill and what they thought they needed. And it turned out to be, like I said, the best thing that could have happened in Alcoholics Anonymous. Absolutely amazing. I didn't use the F word. It was absolutely amazing how that happened. He made the gift, and everybody else figured out what their proportion should be. So it goes on to say, The so-called Rockefeller dinner list has since been almost the only source of outside money gifts to the Alcoholic Foundation. These donations averaged around $3,000 annually, and they continued for about 5 years from 1940 to 1945. This income, the foundation divided between Dr. Bob and me, and enabled to give AA a good part of our time during that crucial period. Not long since, the foundation trustees were able to write the original dinner contributors with great thanks for their help. It would no longer be needed that Alcoholic Foundation had become adequately supported by AA groups by the income of the book called Alcoholics Anonymous, that the personal needs of Dr. Bob and myself were being met out of the book royalties. The significant thing about Mr. Rockefeller's dinner, of course, was not only the money it raised. What we did need then, even as much, was a favorable public recognition. We needed someone who would stand up and say what he thought and felt about Alcoholics Anonymous. Considering the fact that we were few in number, that we were none too sure of ourselves, that not long society had been known as common drunkards, I think Mr. Rockefeller's wisdom and courage were great indeed. The effect of that dinner meeting was instantaneous. The press and newswire carried it all over. If we can go on to page 64, about the third paragraph down, goes on to say, we realize that we must, about the third paragraph down, we realize that we must, for the first time, ask the AA groups for assistance. So obviously now we are going to be supporting. 2 of our alcoholic members of the foundation traveled out among the AA groups to explain the need. They presented their listeners with these ideas. The support of the central office was definite responsibility of AA groups, that answering written inquiries was a necessary assistance to our 12-step work, that we AAs ought to pay these office expenses ourselves and rely no further on outside charity or insufficient book sales. Page 65. It says, under these arrangements, the office would ask the groups twice yearly for the funds and render at the same time a statement of expenses for the previous period. Skip the next sentence. It says, now clearly understanding the situation, most groups began contributing to the Alcoholic Foundation for the central office expenses and have continued to do so ever since. It is the practice of AA tradition of self-supporting had a firm beginning. Page 66, the second paragraph, he goes on to say, the last few years of AA have been phenomenal. Second paragraph. Nearly everybody in America knows about AA. Seemingly the rest of the globe will soon learn about AA. We'll learn about AA. Travelers go abroad, and our literature is translated into other tongues. And then it goes on to say about the second half of that paragraph where it says the foundation. Page 66, second last paragraph, it says, the foundation accumulated a prudent financial reserve for the future. That reserve now stands more than a full year's headquarters expense, which still remains not much above the very low figure of $1 per AA per year. And it closes in the last paragraph. This account of the stewardship of Alcoholics Anonymous during its infancy brings us to the present, the year 1947, with continued AA growth and AA's service to the future promise. Isn't that something? So 1947, we're well on our way to supporting. See what it says on page 75 about self-supporting. And that is on the second paragraph. Page 75, second paragraph. It is always, not sometimes, not most, not a lot, not quite a few, always better for its members to raise money among themselves. And then the second to last sentence says, our reputation for complete self-support is a valuable asset. Beware of loans or contributions with implied obligations, political entanglements, or controversial issues attached. I get it, I get it, I get it. Okay. Now, on page 291, see what he says about this. I'm going to get going here, huh? All right, we'll make it. 291. The second paragraph where it says, years ago, 291, second paragraph. Years ago, we slowly evolved an idea about AA being self-supporting. There had been trouble here and there about outside gifts, then still more trouble developed. Consequently, we began to devise a policy of no outside gifts. We began to suspect that large sums would tend to make us irresponsible and could divert us from our primary aim. Finally, we saw that the long pull, outside money, obviously, outside money could ruin us utterly. At this point, we had just an idea or general policy hardened firmly down into AA tradition. We saw that we must, not should, could, ought to, sacrifice the quick nearby advantage for the long-term safety. So obviously now you see one of the real values of tradition 7 and ensures tradition 5. And what he got done saying there too is the seemingly good is the deadly enemy of the best. And when it comes to Alcoholics Anonymous, nothing but our very best will ever be good enough. It's so powerful how this is all wrapped in together. Okay, let's say AA self-supporting 349. Never knew he talked so much about money in here, did you? It's a beautiful thing. Got to go. Okay, AA's tradition of self-support. It goes on this. AA's far-flung 12-step activities carrying the AA message to the next sufferer are the very lifeblood of our AA adventure. Isn't that cool? He always relates it to us personally in our recovery. Without this vital, that means life and death, activity, we'd soon become anemic. We would literally wither and die. Now, where do AA services worldwide, area, local fit in the scheme of things? Why should we provide these functions with money? The answer is simple. Every single AA service is designed to make more and better 12-step work possible. Whether it be a group meeting place, a central or intergroup office to arrange hospitalization or sponsorship, or the World Service headquarters to maintain unity and effectiveness all over the globe. Though not costly, these service agencies are absolutely essential to our continued expansion, to our survival as a fellowship. Their costs are a collective obligation that rests squarely upon all of us. Not some, not most, not a lot, not quite a few, all of us. So now he's get it. Our support of services actually amounts to recognition on our part that AA must everywhere function in full strength. Then under our tradition of self-support, we are going to foot the bill, italicized. We have long known that Alcoholics Anonymous has no need for charitable contributions from any source. Our fellowship is self-supporting. Neither do AA groups try to meet their rehabilitation expenses of thousands of newcomers. Long ago, we heard that this was impractical. Instead, AA offers a new person a spiritual way of life, wow, that can eliminate the alcohol problem. With this accomplished, the new person in company of his fellow sufferers can then begin the solution of his personal problems. That's called alcoholism, y'all. Including financial ones. Oh, really? So AA then groups themselves accept no charitable funds and give none away. At first glance, this attitude may be hard-nosed, even callous. An immense experience tells us otherwise. Money gifts as a prerequisite of getting sober are usually worthless when made a function of an AA group. Of course, we can see AA's primary charity and 12-step activity. Tens of thousands of us daily carry the AA message to newcomers. We travel millions of miles. We are absent ourselves from our business, our home. In the aggregate, we lay out large sums. As individuals, we do not hesitate to give temporary financial aid to the newcomer, and when he seems to want sobriety first. Here and then, the money charity aplenty are always given on a personal, face-to-face basis, and perhaps this cannot be wholly charitable. Every 12-step effort means certain sobriety when added spiritual growth for the sponsor. When both these principles, we understand that AA wants no charity, that we support our own service, we understand, but sometimes we forget. That's a beautiful description of what the group does and what the individual does and why. I mean, it really just cuts away with there is no guesswork at all. 134, and this is one of the most beautiful articles or portions that I've read. In fact, I used it last night on that concept thing. Listen what he says. The last 1, 2, 3 paragraphs. It's where it says, let us make our services respectable. Uh-oh. We have some disrespectful services? Yeah, It is this. Let us make our services respectable. Let us rank them in importance with the 12 steps of recovery. First leg. The 12 principles of AA tradition. Second. Let us forget our fear of over-organization. Let us remember AA as a whole cannot be organized, but we must so organize to support our special centers that AA can function. Let us forget our early fears of professionalism, accumulation of wealth, and of government. Tradition, tradition, tradition. Experience, the E word. It's history. It's done. It's over with. It is what it is, not philosophy, not an idea, not a theory. Experience, now fortified by our traditions, have already assured us none of these evils are likely to descend upon us. However, if we don't follow him, guess what? The evil's coming. Darth Vader's on his way. Now it goes on to say about this. Okay. Above all, let's change our old attitudes about money. Collectively, AA members can earn an enormous income because of their sobriety. It's a $500 million bonanza each year. Can we not wisely, gratefully, and humbly reinvest a tiny fraction of this vast sum in those vital services that make AA tick? I think we can, and I think we shall. For in our own lives, we have seen sobriety produce money. In our own AA services, we've seen a little money produce incalculable spiritual dividends. Let's think this all through again. Powerful, powerful, powerful. So he's saying sometimes you got to get this to get the spiritual development. And listen what he closes this up with. One of the most beautiful parts of this book. By our 12 steps, we have recovered. Legacy 1. By our 12 traditions, we have unified. Second legacy. And by our third legacy, service. Here's why it's so important about the concepts that I was talking about. And obviously, look at what it is if we're talking about tradition 7. We shall carry the AA message. Remember? But that's part of the first one. I get it. The 3 sides, I get it. All 3 of them are equal. Okay. All right. Carry the AA message down through the corridors of time to come. Of this, I'm happily confident. Last but not least, we have a letter to the groups on page 138. Letter to the groups. Skip down to the 3rd paragraph where it says, Our experience here at AA headquarters in the 15 years since it was set up definitely shows, indeed it shouts, the foundation must always have on hand a substantial reserve of prudent hard cash to take care of frequent deficits that occur in the future possibility of depression or severe inflation, thereby guaranteeing our world services under conditions. This isn't a theory at all. In the first 2 years of operation, the entire expense of general headquarters was paid out of book and profit pamphlet receipts. Then in 1941, the groups by voluntary contribution commenced to assume the general headquarters offices, but only in 5 out of the 13 years since 41 have group contributions paid the full bill of AA General Service Office. On 2 occasions, the reserve book earnings accumulated in the foundation have saved the general headquarters office from closing or of its service being severely curtailed. Look at them when this was written in 1954. And it goes on to say, groups have failed to meet office expenses by $2,000 a month. Grapevine was losing $1,000 a month for almost 2 years. This rate of loss continued. It was only by reason of our reserve of book money in the foundation that Grapevine did not completely go out of business. and there have been severe contradiction for the General Service Office at the very time when our fast-growing fellowship was needed more services, not less. Skip down about 3 paragraphs. These are the facts of our history that show us at all times, not some, not most, not a lot, not quite a few, a safe reserve fund in the foundation. This is money that guarantees the operation of AA World Services, rain or shine. Due to increased expense and inflation in recent years, our reserve fund now stands only at 9 months operating expense of AA's general service. Go down to the last sentence on that page. It says, the action of the conference gave me immense satisfaction and relief. It means that the headquarters will be made depression and calamity proof. I trust that all groups will see the great need for this protective accumulation, at the same time will fully maintain their voluntary contributions, of which our world service expenses are meant. 1,000 thanks to you. Last but not least, what he was talking about in the 50s is going on today. Have you noticed that the big book, the price of it has increased greatly? It's not reflective of the cost of production of the book. Unfortunately, you might be surprised, there's a lot of groups, areas, districts that aren't sending any money to New York. That's the facts. Since treatment is going down, treatment was one of the biggest purchasers, hospitals and yada yada, all that, of big books and other literature. Since that's gone down, guess what? This has gone down too. I suggest when you get a chance, conference approved. In fact, they have all kinds of stuff. AA guidelines for finance. It goes on to explain, and it's real handy when we're about done. It's very important because it gives us a understanding of what we're talking about and where the seventh tradition has evolved from Rockefeller to the year 2017. Where money and spirituality mix, supporting AA's structure. There's a lot of different things. Questions and answers, frequently answered questions. And it goes on to say, and this would be on your group, some groups are tax exempt and how you set it up. Bank accounts, tax IDs, number. Nobody's laundering money, I don't think, anyhow. Wouldn't that be a hoot? Probably wouldn't be the first time around here, but anyhow. Yeah, my group has a modest $2 million in the bank. But anyhow, it talks about questions and answers, talks about the liability, the insurance, and believe it or not, these day and ages, it's something to think about. I hate to say it, but you know how society is this day and age. But most importantly, it talks about the reserve fund, and most importantly of all, if you are a group member, and if you have a treasury that is accumulated your prudent reserve, like I said, most nonprofit 3 to 6 months is usually good. Obviously, we're not the General Service Office where you had 9 months in a year, and we're not talking that kind of money. But here's what it is, samples of group contributions to AA services. Hopefully, you are a member of a group that does that. Now, there's a percent that you can do it. The district, the area committee, the general service, the intergroup, other AA service entities, and that is you can assign the split. And here's another recommended, 10% to your district, 10% to your area, 30% to your general service office, 50% to your intergroup office, or the real easy one used to be 40% to the district, 30 to the area, 30 to GSO. Obviously, we prefer the 50, the 30, 10, and 10. So, that is what's recommended, and obviously we know that unfortunately we, meaning Alcoholics Anonymous, are not paying our own way to the General Service Office. Now, I don't care if you approve or don't approve of the General Service Office. But I do care, because that's where our big books come from. That's where this comes from. That's where all of our pamphlets come from. Now, why is that happening? Is it that we don't understand, don't care, don't matter, whatever? But you saw how important it was. And guess what? We need to take care of ourselves, because guess what? If we don't, nobody's going to. Last thought of the night, once again, and don't forget about this. I'm glad I saw some people that had this out, the traditions checklist, and we're going to go over number 7, and we'll be done. And these are the questions. I think there's just 6 of them on tradition 7. And it goes like this. Honestly, now do I do all I can help AA, my group, my central office, my GSO, remain self-supporting? It was recommended, and I personally do that, for every year of your recovery/sobriety, send New York $1 for each year. Is your sobriety worth that? I don't know. I'll even give you the 49-cent stamp to do that, so if it is, okay? And it says, could I put a little more in the basket on behalf of the new guy who can't afford it yet? How generous was I when I was tanked in the bar room? Interesting thing, and this is not urban legend or folklore, I know a guy that was going to a lot of meetings. He was doing the dollar basket, and this was years ago. He, on his own, decided to double his contributions. And do you know what happened that year? God doubled that guy's income. That is not BS. That's a true story. That guy happened to be me. So if you want a pay raise, start doubling your contributions of what you're putting in the basket, and God will see fit. Whatever you're putting in, you are going to get back either financially, or you're going to get back something that money can't buy. Money and spirituality mix. So, number 2, it says, should the Grapevine sell advertising space to book publishers and drug companies so it can make a bigger profit and a bigger magazine in full color at a cheaper price? Well, hell yeah. No, of course we can't do that. Number 3, if General Service Office runs short of funds some year, would it be okay to let the government subsidize AA groups in hospitals and prisons? Oh, my God. We'd have Watergate in New York with Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay. Number 4, is it more important to get a big AA collection from a few people or a small collection which more members participate? Number 5, is a group's treasurer's report unimportant AA business? How does the treasurer feel about it? And number 6, how important is my recovery in the feeling of self-respect rather than the feeling of always being an obligation for charity received? I think it's clear tonight that we see how vital and how important the 7th tradition is to Alcoholics Anonymous. And last but not least, I want to close with the Declaration of Unity. 1970, 35th anniversary of Miami Beach, Florida, and goes as this. This we owe to AA's future, to place our common welfare first, to keep our fellowship united, for on AA unity depends our lives and the lives of those to come. And the only way we can ensure that is by ensuring tradition 7, which ensures tradition 5, which ensures tradition 3, which ensures tradition 1. So you can see, indeed, tradition 7 is a matter of life and death. See you next week, I hope, for Hopeless Variety. My name's Harmon. Hey, it's good to see you. Hard to believe that we're going to be 2/3 done tonight. Yeah, after tonight we got 4 more weeks. Anyhow, where we're at is it's called the language of the heart, and it's been amazingly good for some of us, a lot of us, and what I'm saying about that is really taking on a new and a personal meaning, especially tonight on Tradition 8. By looking at face value, it may seem all whatever, but it really is the lifeblood of our fellowship called Alcoholics Anonymous, and you'll see how it will come alive. Anyhow, we usually like to go to a quiet place before we pray our serenity prayer from the heart versus saying it from our head, and we'll invite God in, and He'd do what He do for all of us individually and together, if we could, please. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. And we've established that we have a couple ideas that is really comes alive every week, and we've coined these the three pertinent ideas of the traditions. And the first one would be unity, second one primary purpose, and the third one responsibility. And you'll see that tonight's tradition really is so loaded with all three. All of them are. Some have a little bit more larger percentage or proportion, but tonight's really has all three of them, and it's just absolutely amazing and fascinating. And we found out that these words is how we achieve it, and particularly tradition 12, we'll see that come alive, and that's word humility and the word sacrifice. And obviously we've established humility as being a condition that is something that we receive. We never get it. It's a gift, like everything in here. And obviously it's being cut down to the right size with our Almighty Creator, ourselves, and our fellow man. And we find how we get that is by sacrificing what I think, what I want, what I feel, and that slaying of that I, me, and my to we, us, and ours. And we established that Bill, when he wrote this, he talked about relations, and we have a 3 plus 1, and one was our relations with money, but the relations obviously with these traditions we find ironically is with ourselves first, because if I'm not right with me, well, I'm done with everybody and everything else in this world. Anyhow, and then he talks about the relations with the individual alcoholic with himself, then of course with his group, then his group with Alcoholics Anonymous, and then Alcoholics Anonymous with the world. We've gone at great length to talk about an AA group and a group of AA versus an AA meeting of AAs, and this alleged special purpose group. And this is so cool about unity, obviously our first tradition or our first pertinent idea. And he talks about substantial unity, essential unity, powerful unity, perfect unity, and wonderful unity. And it's mind-boggling in itself. We have schedules for what it's worth, and we're going to be meeting every Wednesday except for Thanksgiving Eve, which is November 22nd. We will not be here, and then we will finish in the first week of December. And if we can pass this around, this is the syllabus that's ongoing, and obviously I hand it out each week, and it keeps adding to it, so it will be from the first week till where we're at today as far as the 8th tradition. Hard to believe that November is here. And we like to read a couple things that kind of pull us together or why we're here. Obviously, and we find out tonight that obviously the traditions aren't separate from the steps, but they are interwovenly to a tightly interwoven protective mantle. And obviously it protects ourselves from ourselves. And we were talking about this in the beginning. If AA is going to falter, it will be from within. Our biggest wounds are self-inflicted. And obviously, Bill coined it that obviously we are children of chaos. And these traditions are not rules, laws, or punishments. They're spiritual principles for the survival of AA. And obviously, we don't argue spiritual principles. We tried to live with them, and we found out and established that the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are action steps for the individual for recovery, and the 12 traditions are mostly non-action, not only for the individual but for the group and the fellowship, and they ensure emotional sobriety for the individual, the groups, and the fellowship. And also we've established that these, since they're not rules, regulations, or laws, we obey them willingly because we ought to, then because we want to, and then the bottom line, because we must or we will fade off the scene. And the power of the traditions lie in the fact that these life-giving principles spring out of our experience, which is history, and obviously he called them truths or spiritual truths, and they are rooted in love, and they are a guide to a better way of working and living, and means survival and harmony, like the 12 steps do for the individual, and obviously for the whole fellowship. And our 12 traditions are for our common survival and well-being. And obviously the traditions work not because we're better people, but because we are weaker people. And Bill said, the 12 traditions are a design of construction for our survival. And AA is no success story in the ordinary sense of the word. It's a story of suffering transmuted under the grace of God into spiritual progress. And obviously, we found out that it's a lot easier to, if I embrace the traditions rather than try and enforce them, it is a lot more effective. And obviously, these 12 traditions were forged in the school of hard experience of thousands of anvils. And Bill said, implicit through AA and the traditions is the confession that we as a fellowship has its sins. We admit that we have character defects as a society, and these defects threaten us continually. And obviously, the 12 traditions help us preserve the past, understand the present, and predict the future all in the same time. And obviously, we found out that if we don't learn from our past mistakes, we will repeat them over and over and over again. So, and Bill's coined these are a design of construction for our survival. And it's pretty well established that without these, we were people who could not exist at all except for the grace of God. And he said both the 12 steps and the 12 traditions were spiritual principles designed for ego reduction. And they take us from anonymity to humility and everything in between. Now, normally we read a thing called The Language of the Heart, and oddly enough, it is going to be in one of our readings tonight, so we will skip that. We always like to start with the short and the long form of tradition of the week that we're doing. And here's what was really cool about this one. Number 8, the short form. It says Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional. So that's a definite period of time, forever. Okay, now he is going to describe what non-professional or clarify in the long form. And he says, but our service centers may employ special workers. He will clarify the special workers in the long form and what the non-professional is. What I found absolutely fascinating in these traditions, 5 times he wrote the group specifically to the AA group. 5 of the traditions he specifies the AA group. And by the way, we're talking about that and can't even address that unless I know what this is and isn't, and the difference between an AA group and a group of AAs. 5 times. 3 traditions he mentions Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the whole kit and caboodle. And then the other traditions, the other 4 traditions, not specific, other than he uses the word us, we, and ours. So you can see with these 12 traditions, he covers every possible facet of Alcoholics Anonymous, from the individual to the group to the whole fellowship and society. There is not an area that is not addressed in the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. I found that absolutely amazing that Bill, in his wisdom, or God's wisdom, I guess, who authored these things, was able to cover all that. The long form of Tradition 8, and it is so cool when you get in to see what this tradition offers and what it gives us, and it goes as this. Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever, use that F word again, okay? Forever non-professional. And we had this going too. The seventh tradition about that. Can I get some change? We'll put 5 in and take 6 out. That's alcoholic? That's alcoholic math there, dude. I got that. That's why they say keep coming back, man. Yeah. Who said you can't make money in AA? Anyhow, where was I? Oh yes, forever non-professional. Now, glad you asked what is non-professional. It says, we define professionalism as the occupation of counseling alcoholics for fees or hire, period. So when we say non-professional, that's what he means about that. But we may employ alcoholics where they are going to perform those special services which we may otherwise have to engage non-alcoholics. We have somebody that's doing a special service back here. Thank you, Bob, for doing that. And I have been maybe neglectful. Bob is recording this, and he is going to allow us to purchase these if we want. That is a special service. He is not making money off of Alcoholics Anonymous. Our office down on Main Street is not making money off of Alcoholics Anonymous. They have some employees that are special workers. And here's the key of the magic to that. Speaking of special workers, this is how this mind works. We have books for sale, for borrow, or for loan. How are we doing on that?
We're doing okay.
We're doing okay, but we have some delinquent, we have some anonymous, we have some books out there that aren't being paid for. So, okay, so if that would be in your hula hoop, please make sure that Cheryl gets the money so we can keep coming back, if you will. I mean that with all earnestness, and we'll talk about that later. So anyhow, it says, we may employ alcoholics where they're going to perform those services by which may otherwise be engaged by non-alcoholics. Such special workers may well be recompensed, but our usual 12-step work is never, the N word, never to be paid for. Not sometimes, not a lot, not a few, never, and forever. Those are some pretty powerful words. So, guess who is the professional alcoholic? Now, I hate to use that word, counselor. Who is the professional in working with alcoholics? We are! So guess what, y'all? If the message that we are carrying, step 12, is nothing other than Alcoholics Anonymous, we'll be in good shape. If it is something other than Alcoholics Anonymous, SS, something similar, FF, Fear and Fellowship, HH, Hip Hop AA, anything goes, RR, Rehab Rhetoric, all kinds of things I talk about in that other thing. Guess what? We are infecting the message, not carrying it. So, if our recovery rate is what it is, and we will talk about that tonight, it is not the newcomer that is coming in the door. It is the people that are here now. Hate to say it, but it is what it is, because obviously the newcomer, when they came in back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and whatever, are still the newcomer. So why is it gone from 75% down to maybe 4%? Those damn new people coming in the door. So yeah, okay, I got to go home and watch the Cavaliers, so I'll see you guys later, right? Yeah. So, food for thought. So anyhow, that's what we talk about as far as who's the professional. Now, before we get to this, when we have that, it will be very clear what I was just saying. The 12 traditions are often referred to as why it works. They ensure the continuance of AA as a whole by providing guidelines for groups to evaluate their activities and actions. In a practical vein, they are individually and collectively humility builders for the group, as they ask the group to consider its conduct from a broader perspective and, when necessary, give up something for the overall good of AA. Long drawn out word for that word, sacrifice. Their traditions contain spiritual principles. These principles, when applied in our lives, complement the steps as a guide to personal recovery. Here are the spiritual principles of the traditions that I strive for in my daily life. Number 8, we give freely what has been given freely to us, or non-professional. So, how did this history of this tradition begin and how did it develop and how does it evolve to where we're at today. AA will never have a professional class. Almost no recovery from alcoholism has ever been brought on by the best professionals, either medical or religious. We know that, and obviously that's why Until Alcoholics Anonymous was born June 10th of 1935. So, every time we try to professionalize our 12th step, the result was the same. Our singleness of purpose had been defeated. What I'm saying is in Tradition 8, all the 7 traditions before that allow us to do Tradition 8. Tradition 8 allows us to do the first part of Step 12. So if we don't have these 12 traditions, we are screwed. Part of the first part of Step 12, carrying this message, we're done. And it really came alive in tonight's preparation. I mean, it just blew me away. So, what I'm saying is, obviously, the reason that singleness of purpose is defeated, we've already crossed the line of being diverted or having more than one purpose. Simply, we won't listen to a paid 12-stepper. Money compromises everything that the 12-stepper would say or would do. In this case, money and spirituality do not mix. When that basket going around, it does mix because obviously we need to pay the church, we need to pay for the books that people are borrowing, coffee and cups and all that stuff. So it does mix sometimes, but not when we're carrying this message. Okay, so obviously everybody in this room, as recovered, not recovering, recovered alcoholics, we are the professionals with a program of recovery and the traditions for complete recovery. It's our job, not theirs. When I'm saying not there, we're talking about the psychiatrists, the doctors, we're talking about that. And the people that are doing the special services, they allow us to be the professionals. They are ordering the literature. They are selling the literature. They're getting the lead sheets. They're answering the phones. They're listening to the crying and the pissing and the moaning and all the things that go around. All of us use the intergroup office one way or another. Lead sheets, where you get your literature, I would say most of us, okay? I would say 99.9. Maybe there are some people that don't use the office. Obviously, our office, then, where do they get their literature? From New York, General Service Office. Like it or not, we all use that, and guess what? Without the special workers, we're done. Because you know how that happened. This is how it happened. You might be surprised at the history of that. The first clubhouse was called Last Mile down in New York City, obviously, when Bill got this thing going. Was all volunteer staff, volunteer people. They had cooks, they had janitors, they had all kinds of things. Now, you might be surprised. They had a schedule, and the alcoholic volunteers weren't showing up when they said they would. I know that may surprise you. And when some of them got there, they weren't working. I know you're even bigger surprised about that. Bill found out if that place is going to stay alive, we're going to have to start paying people to be the custodians, to be this, to do that, whether they're alcoholic or not. That's called a special worker. A lot of people got their undies in a bunch in the beginning. You don't hear about it too much more, that they were making money off of AA. That's a lie. That's not true. They were keeping the doors open and should be paid for doing that. They are not professional 12-step. We are the ones. They're allowing us to do that. And obviously, that is the history of it, and it's fascinating to how it's evolved today. So what are the special workers? Obviously, they are just that: janitors, secretaries, authors, laborers, and local intergroups, general service office, who are not professionalizing the 12-step. They're just making it possible for all of us, the professionals, to do our 12-step work. Now, we have found out last week Tradition 7 and this week Tradition 8. You might want to write this down, where money. Money or contribution equals services. So that equals recovery, which equals saved lives. So in that case, money and spirituality do mix. I'll give you that formula again. Real simple. Contribution equals services. We went at great length last week about that services. Equal recovery equals saved lives. So we've got one of two options on this being the professional, and I love this phone call or this thing. And that would be in 12 Traditions Illustrated, if you get it. And I call it Traditions for Dummies Like Me. I'll speak for myself. You got like a night like tonight, November. You can see where it's raining, the window's open, and the curtains are blowing, and the rain's coming in. And he's next to his, I guess it's his wife. Who knows what it would be today. But anyhow, the phone rings. He's thinking to himself, no one could pay me to go out on a night like this. But you know what his answer is in the phone? Yeah, I'll be right over. The moral of the story is two. The moral, obviously, is the truth of the story. Which end of the phone would you rather be on? Alcoholics Anonymous, the pay is terrible, but the benefits you can't beat. It's got the best 401k, it's got the best retirement, it's got the best benefit package in the world. It's called being recovered, happy, joyous, and free. And it ain't for sale. However, it involves that dirty 4-letter word that most alcoholics can't stand. It ends with K, not that other word. It begins with W, work. There's nothing free in this world. You don't always get what you pay for, but you always pay for what you get. In God's economy, it's real simple. That other big book that we talk about, or the good book, says he worked for 6 days and took the 7th day off. I've read that book, and nowhere once does it say that he went back to work again. So if there's going to be any work down here, guess who he expects to do it? Us! Because remember, he gave us dominion over everything, and we are made in his likeness and image, and he's given us some special gifts. The gift of reasoning, the gift of thought, the gift of free will, the gift of self-will. No other animals have that. But along with that comes, oh shit, I said it, yeah, this word, responsibility. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Tradition 8. If we can go to page, where are we at? 86 and 87. I think that's where we're at, right? And like I said, it blew my mind when I got into this part of it again, how much clearer it was and how the words come alive when it's not just a clicky thing about the 12 steps and 12 traditions being together, whatever. It's reality. Look at this date, July 1948. And it says, look how he starts this. Tradition 8. Listen to what his first word, you would be thinking he would be talking about one of the traditions. Listen how he says. Throughout the world, AAs are 12-stepping. Oh. Now, wait a minute. We're talking about traditions, aren't we? No. Yeah, no. 12-stepping. Oh, by the way, that's chapter 7, working with others. You might want to write this down so you get it. In that chapter, he tells us 86 things to do. He tells us 29 things don't do. So I had better know when he says 12-stepping where the manual is and where I get that. Chapter 7, working with others. So he goes on to say, with thousands of new prospects a month, between 1 and 2,000 of these stick on our first presentation. Oh, by the way, that begs back to that thing that I was talking about. Forward to the second edition, it said 50% recovered at once, another 25% later on for the recovery rate of 75%. There's an appendix in the first edition that I've got that verifies that. That statistic was 66%, and right now we would be lucky if we would be at 4%. So, those damn newcomers again, I said it, yeah, okay. So it goes on to say, past experience, oh, that's history, it's undebatable, shows that most of the remainder will come back to us later on. Isn't this cool? Now listen to this. Almost entirely unorganized and completely non-professional, this mighty spiritual current. Oh, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we carried this message. So just what he got done telling us, it's a mighty spiritual current. Is now flowing from alcoholics who are well. Didn't say not drinking and say recovered. Whenever he talks about that in the big book, he uses that interchangeably. Well, okay? To those who are sick, one alcoholic to another, that's all. Period. Oh, identification. See what he's done with all these traditions? Unity, second tradition, ultimate God. Third tradition, membership, Alcoholics in Alcoholics Anonymous. Fourth tradition, fifth, all of that. What he's saying, so we, on tradition 8, can do what we're supposed to do in step 12, first part of step 12, the multi-part. Without tradition 8, I am done. You are done. We are done. Okay? There's nothing more, nothing less, nothing else. Listen to what he says. Could this vast and vital, life and death, face-to-face effort ever be professionalized and even organized? I mean, how cool is that? Tradition 8 ensures that we are able to do what we are able to do. And without this tradition, then we're not. And we're done, okay? And it says, most emphatically, could not. The few efforts of professionalized 12-step work have always, not sometimes, not most, a lot, failed quickly. Today, no AA will tolerate the idea of paid AA therapists or organizers. Wow, so now that begs me to listen to what it says as far as organized, and thank God we don't have that. And if you've worked with enough people, the message is the same. Obviously, we told you about that. The 86 do's and 29 don'ts. However, you've got the X factor. The X factor is everybody's experience and personality is different. In other words, when I 12-step Smitty, I got to talk about those damn Steelers. And when I 12-step Ted, I got to talk about Harleys. And well, you just go on and on and on. Everybody's got an Achilles heel. Whether that be her, him, kids, whatever. My experience is find out what that is. There's a point to where you can get in quicker, and then you can do the work. That's vital, face-to-face imperative. So it goes on to say this, okay? Obviously, no organizer, nor does any AA like to be told just how he must handle that new prospect of his. Know this great life-giving stream, step 12, can never, not some, not most, a lot, quite a few, be dammed up by paid do-gooders or professionals. Alcoholics Anonymous is never, that N-word, going to cut its own lifelines to a man. We are sure of that. How cool and how vital is Tradition 8 to our past, our present, and most importantly, our future. It says, but what about those who serve full-time in other capacities? Our cooks, caretakers, paid intergroup secretaries are AA professionals. Because our thinking about these people is still unclear, we often feel and act as though they were such. By the way, in that first paragraph, he uses the word always, once, and never twice. Two really powerful words. Anyhow, he goes on to say the impression of professionalism subtly attached to them, so we frequently hear that they are making money out of AA, or that they are professionalizing AA. Seemingly, if they take our AA dollars, they don't quite belong to us AAs anymore. We sometimes go further. We underpay them. Can you imagine that? Okay. On the theory they ought to be glad to cook for the AA cheap. Don't kid yourself. There's that mentality around Alcoholics Anonymous. As sick as it is, it's alive and well. Okay. And here's why we have this. It's this, it's the second part of step 4, the inventory. And when you sit down and think about this the spiritual malady of alcoholism. This is one of the driving forces of alcoholism, sobriety, untreated alcoholism, anger, disgust, all the things that we carry around. It's this. Now, isn't this carrying our fears of professionalism rather far? If these fears ever got too strong, none but a saint or an incompetent could work for Alcoholics Anonymous. We know there ain't no saints, so we can roll that out. A lot of incompetence, of course. We might have a whole people lined up for that. But anyhow, it says, our supply of saints being quite small, we certainly wind up with the less competent workers that we need. We're beginning to see our few paid workers are performing only the tasks that our volunteers cannot consistently handle. We talked about that. Primarily, these folks are not doing 12-step work. They are making more and better 12-step work possible for you and I, the professionals. Secretaries at their desk are valuable points of contact, information, and public relations. That's what they're paid for and nothing else. They help carry the good news of AA to the outside world and bring our prospects face to face with us. That is not AA therapy. It's just a lot of very necessary but often thankless work. So where needed, let us revise our attitude towards those labor at our special services. Let us treat them as AA associates and not as hired help. Let's recompense them fairly, and above all, let's absolve them from the label of professionalism. Let us also distinguish clearly between organizing the AA movement and setting up in a reasonably business-like manner in a few essential services of contact and propagation. Once we do that, all will be well. The million or so fellow alcoholics who are still sick will then continue to get the break we 60,000 AAs have already had. Let us give our service desk the hand they so well deserve. I'm going to go ahead and do this, so I'm going to publicly kiss her. Thank you, baby, for what you do for all of us. Yeah, I tell you what, you'll hear what they don't do and what they're doing wrong. You never hear what they do right. So, okay, page 93. This one blew me away too. I like this short little sentence or two he talks about it. This would be tradition 8, and this is what jumped out at the page this time. Tradition 8. Forswears professionalizing our 12-step work. There is no guesswork about it. But it does guarantee, only tradition that I know where it says guarantee. Powerful, powerful, powerful. What does it guarantee? Our few paid service workers and unquestioned amateur status. Once and for all. So we are the professionals here. Okay, let's see what it says on page 60. It's about third paragraph, the last sentence. Page 60, where it says, shouldn't we? Page 60, third paragraph, last sentence. Shouldn't we be most careful, squiggly writing, not to do anything which might lead to a professional or a proprietor class within your ranks? Next couple sentences, obviously, will give us the history, and it starts where it says, we know we have a new life for those who die or go mad by thousands each year. Must our story wait while it's passed around by word of mouth only, becoming hopelessly garbled meanwhile? Finally, our friends agreed that something needed to be done, but they did continue to insist our movement ought to never be professionalized. And obviously, we're talking about, before that is about money. Tradition 7, remember our oath to poverty, ensures tradition 8, which ensures step 12. Yes, indeed, interrelated, interwoven, more tighter than I ever could have imagined, ever knew. So, he goes on to say on page 218, see what he says about this. On page 218, bottom of the page where it says tradition 8, bottom of page 218, Tradition 8. Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. We talked about that on page 220, the third paragraph, and it's really going to give us the history of Tradition 8, and it's so cool about how the traditions are interrelated, because when he talks about 8, 7's always in the foreground, if you will, or oath to poverty, because money would divert us and all the other traditions before that. And then, of course, it sets us up for next week, Tradition 9. But anyhow, it goes as this. Second paragraph where it says, at first, page 220. At first, we made certain concessions to the radicals. We were talking about with the money in here. And it says, we conceded, though unorganized as a whole, we should nevertheless have to create committees and service boards that AA could function and carry our message, and regional, international levels. We would somehow have to hire a few full-time workers. This was going to cost money, but never a lot, even never enough to pose any great problem for future temptation. So you can see 7, 8, and 9 are all together. Because of 7, we have 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1 before it, so it's all coming alive. It's all starting to make a lot of sense now, and obviously Tradition 8, without it, we can't do first part of step 12. It goes on to say, this obviously necessity did, however, pose for question of professionalism. There was a widespread and justified fear in the early days that AA might be saddled with a class of paid 12-steppers. People would want salaries or fees for carrying the AA message person to person, face to face. I think that's what they call a recovery coach. I've applied to try to go out to Hollywood for some of these guys out there, but nobody's taking me up on that. I want to be a professional sponsor, but nobody's taking me up on it. Don't kid yourself. It happens, sad to say, and guess what? As it always says, it always crash and burn. It's for fun, and it's for free, as the Father would have it. Much is expected of those who have received much. Freely give of what you freely received. And obviously, you got to give it away to keep it. And that is not with a paycheck or a 1099 or anything like that. Sorry to say. Anyhow, it goes on to say, it says, obviously, paid 12 steps worker, people would want salaries for carrying a message person to person, face to face. It did not take us long to see that such a development would certainly kill, powerful, the spirit of our whole undertaking. Not some of it, not most of it, not a lot of it, the whole thing. So I'm telling you, when Tradition 8 is a vital life and death, it's vital what it says there. It'll kill the whole thing. Not some of it, not most of it, not a lot of it. The whole undertaking, the 12-step simply couldn't be sold for money. The great fear, we went from justified fear to great fear.